evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I'm here on two fronts. First, as co-curator of the show, Resist, the Art of Protest, and I'd just like to say a few words about that. When Stevens Brosnahan and I envisioned this show, we wanted to include as many different ways of expressing yourself as we could. So in addition to having art on the walls and some placed around, we've included community projects, we've had music, we've had poetry, and tonight we're having stories. And it's all very important that each of you take the idea of using your voice and expressing yourself to resist whatever you think needs resisting. I'm not going to tell you what it should be. I'm going to leave that up to you. There's a lot out there. But I want to thank you all for being here, because showing up is part of resisting. And thank you all for that. Another thing we're really excited about tonight is we have the great honor of giving a scholarship this evening, and I'd like to ask Mr. James Cook to come up and say some words.
Oh, geez, that's my introduction.
Yeah.
Talking over to the side. Great. All right, I have the honor tonight to present the most recent winner of the Amiri Baraka Scholarship. And first, I'd like to thank the Writer Center for sponsoring this, and for Susan Pollock for doing the work and working with the Writer Center and with me to establish the scholarship and to be part of making the award happen. So this particular award is I get to give, this past year I got to give out a lot of scholarships as principal of Gloucester High School, my first year as principal there, and this award is the closest to my heart because it combines two things that are really important to me. One is writing, and a commitment to the craft of writing, a commitment to the difficulty of sitting down and coming up with not only the best way of saying something, but the truest way of saying something, presenting the truth, and the research that goes into that, and the asking questions that goes into that, and not being satisfied with something that is opaque, or something that is not entirely clear, or something that is not entirely true, to both the craft of something that comes across and tells a story at the same time as something that is reveals something about the world to the rest of us is really challenging. And it's something that it's hard work that takes place out of the public eye. And so the recipient of the award definitely embodies that, the challenge of the quiet hours spent away from getting accolades like this one. And the second aspect of the award that makes this so important to me is the social justice aspect of this award. So Amiri Baraka was someone who is both committed to the word and committed to justice in our world. And the recipient of this award is someone who, through reporting, I think in this particular season, the idea of asking good questions, of conducting incisive interviews, of attempting to explain things that are difficult to explain to people, so that people can make informed decisions. The recipient worked both in my rhetoric and argument class last year, and then has been part of a revival in the Gloucester High School newspaper, the Gillnetter, which everyone can read online. Just search for the Gillnetter. It is reported on some of the most important stories in Gloucester and beyond this year, better than a lot of professional journalism, in my opinion. And it's attempted to set right some things that in other media outlets was maybe misconstrued, things that were misconstrued, again, to inform the public. And it's made for a more active and more knowledgeable student body. And they've set this kind of initial group of the renaissance of the newspaper at Gloucester High School has really set a high bar for the students to come. And it's been really one of the most gratifying aspects of the last several years. to witness this renaissance that the recipient of the award was a major part of that as an editor and as a reporter. And again, in this time of playing fast and loose with the truth at times, and of rhetoric over substance, a time of using language to bully, to cajole. I'm very proud of the work of the recipient of the award for really resisting that in the spirit of this resistance that we're celebrating tonight, and that this exhibit is celebrating here. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Caitlin Moore up, recent graduate of Gloucester High School. So this is my first year as principal. Caitlin was a student of mine last year, and I'm extremely proud of the work that she's done in the classroom. I'm extremely proud of the work that she did on the newspaper. And Caitlin will be heading off to Drexel in the fall, and she's going to be working in the sciences. But as we talk so much about the need to have people who are able to communicate involved in the sciences is one of the most important things that a student could do now, is to learn the discipline that they're entering, and also being able to communicate that discipline. So that's another aspect that I wanted to mention about Caitlin. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And now, for the next event, Maureen's going to come up here and get us going with tonight's Fish Tales. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maureen Aylward, and I'm the co-producer and director, along with Henry Farini, of Fish Tales at the Gloucester Writers Center. Thank you all for coming here tonight. I just have a couple of thank yous. Thank you to Amanda Cook for all of her help and support and developing the show, and also the fabulous art show and all her work that she does at the Writers Center. So thank you, Amanda. We're going to get right to the show. We have 9 fabulous storytellers for everyone tonight. Just if you're interested in the bathrooms, they're downstairs. And if you have any questions after the show, please come to me and ask me. If you're interested in telling a story, I would be happy to take your name. If you have an idea for a theme, I also do that too. So please come and talk to me if you have any ideas after the show. Our first storyteller is, well, a real storyteller in so many ways. And it's Wendy Fitting, and she's on the board, or former board member of the Writers Center. She just stepped off the board. Wendy, come on up here and tell your story.
Tonight, I just want to say a couple things about resistance. What I think of as sustenance for resistance. We probably all know that anger, and especially rage, will just, burn out in no time. So in order to resist, you need to have the energy, you need to regroup, you need to rest, etc. There's a wonderful quote from Rabbi Tarfon. He said, "It is not given to you to complete the task, but neither may you give it up." A lot of the change that we seek to see will probably not happen in our lifetime, but you got to do your bit. I think about the sustenance that I have derived for many years comes from encounters with people who live at the margins of society, some of them even locked up in institutions. People who are typically used to be thought of as deviant. These are devalued people. And I've had the opportunity, and being like a religious person, I think of it as grace, moments of grace. I've had the opportunity to be with people who are marginalized, and in unusual settings where something happened that I will never forget, that changed me, okay? And one of them was many, many years ago when I worked at Children's Hospital in the early 70s as an admitting aide. And part of my job was when children came in, I had to take their temperature and get them all set to go up to their division if they were being admitted. And so one of the kids that came in, and I don't know how old he was, but he came in and we went into an examining room, and he was with his mother. And her child, her boy, had cerebral palsy, and he was, pretty contractured. I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of control over his limbs. And as I was getting him ready and taking his temperature, his mother was bent over him singing in, I think it was Portuguese. And his face was just lit up in this, unbelievable smile, just lit up. He couldn't talk, but his eyes were locked on her eyes, and she was singing, and they had this intensely, I think, sort of private, tender moment, and I was there, blessed with observing it. And after that, he went to his division, the ward, whatever, and I asked a friend of mine who worked on that ward, I said, and I told her his name, which I can't remember now, and she said, oh, he's the one that they call the human belt buckle. And that failure to see this humanity, this human being who had shared with his mother this incredible communication of tenderness that I was honored to witness, to see this person sort of reduced to, a sort of a terrible metaphor, cemented that experience. I will never forget that experience. And so that's one of the experiences that I go back to that gives me sustenance for resistance. Another experience was, there was a guy who lived in Gloucester, used a wheelchair. He had very, short arms and legs. Maybe his mother had taken thalidomide, I don't know. And he used a wheelchair, and he got around in it on his own. But he was the kind of person who people would assume, and I worked in human services, that, his quality of life was just awful, right? How could anybody who has these kind of disabilities have any kind of pleasure or meaning in their life? And I was driving down, I didn't work with him, I just saw him in passing. I was driving down the boulevard on a really beautiful sunny day, and this guy, I think his name is Joe, he's since, passed on, was sitting in the wheelchair, and his face lifted to the sun with this absolutely beautiful look of pleasure on his face. And I thought, quality of life? Here it is. If the rest of us could, get such pleasure out of such a simple thing, we wouldn't question whether somebody had a good quality of life. And then the last thing is, a few years ago, I was in Penn Station in New York and waiting for a train to Boston. And this little scrawny woman came up to me, and she didn't have a whole lot of teeth, and she was kind of disheveled and looked a little cuckoo. And she's carrying this sheaf of papers. And she came up to me and she said, would you buy it? The Homeless News. Of course, I dug in, I probably gave her a couple of bucks. And she handed me this rolled up piece of paper, and I looked at it, and it was a circular, right? From and she walked away, and she was like, and I thought, I keep that in my mind and my heart too, as a kind of sustenance for resistance. And I'll end with this. Wendell Berry has a poem called Healing, and in it is a refrain about relying on ignorance. It is to ignorance that the unsuspected teachers will come, and it is the unsuspected teachers, I think, for me, that help give me this sustenance to carry on and resist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Our next storyteller is Abby Cook. And so when a young person wants to tell a story at Fishtails, it's always an absolute yes. And we're really pleased to have Abby back at Fishtails for this story. Abby, come on up and tell your story.
So, some people can be crazy about the environment. It's usually adults, scientists, or people who have science, or anybody who cares about the world remotely. So, usually not kids. But when I was younger, one of my mom's friends is a scientist who works with climate change in the ocean. So I learned a lot about the environment pretty young, and as a kid in elementary school, third grade, I think at third grade, might have been second grade, I noticed that in the cafeteria there was not a recycling bin as easy to get access as the trash bins were. It was behind the curtains in the auditorium, which was the same as the cafeteria, but on the other side. So nobody knew it was there except me. I don't think even the teachers knew. And I didn't really think that was cool, because I saw a bunch of stuff that should be recycled go into the trash bins, and whenever I would go up to throw out my actual trash, I would look in and I would see water bottles and plastic forks and paper and be like, isn't there a recycling bin that these things should go into? So I looked into it with our principal, who said that she'd try to get something done. The recycling bin didn't move. And I remembered this thing that we learned about the year before, or maybe it was the same year if we had done it, if this was in second grade. We learned this really annoying thing called reading streets that we had to study and do tests on. It was the worst reading program ever. But there was this one story that I read where it was about petitions, and we had to think of ideas of what we could do petitions on. I don't remember my story all that well, but I remember the petition part. So I thought, well, maybe if I could do a petition to get the recycling bin into the cafeteria, it could work. Not many kids in elementary school recycle, or know what recycling bin is, or have ever seen one. In our classrooms we have them, but usually not until like 5th grade do you actually use them. So I made a petition, lined paper, ripped out of my notebook, and went around my class and said, will you sign this petition to get the trash bin and recycling bin with the trash bins? Some of my friends signed it without even asking. Some kids looked at me like I was crazy, and other kids just walked away. Think I might have gotten 5 signatures first day. That was pretty great. So I went into my brother's class too. He was in kindergarten or 1st grade at that point. And some of his kindergarten friends that I had known from when he was in preschool also signed it with no question. Most of them just walked away. I went back to my classroom because we were older. I didn't try to go with the 5th or 4th graders because they're way out of my league. I was a lowly 3rd grader. I tried to get a bunch of people to sign it. I might have gotten a few teachers to sign, probably only like the health teacher. Maybe a 5th grade teacher, not sure. But I'm pretty sure at the end of the day I might have had more than 20 signatures. I was pretty happy. And I took it to the principal. She was really surprised. I don't think she was expecting that at all. So I showed her the paper that I had it on, and she looked at it. I think she thought it was a little bit cute. Because then I was the shortest kid in my class, also the youngest. August 25th birthday, and nerd, so it was probably surprising that I would do anything. But I brought it to her, and she looks at the paper, goes, "I'll definitely try to do something about it." Next day at lunch, in between the two dreary-looking trash cans, was the beautiful red recycling bin in all of its glory.
Thank you, Abby. Awesome story. We need more of that, that's for sure. Our next storyteller is Riley Knipsel. Come on up, Riley.
Hello. I'm 32 years old, and I'm gonna be trounced by a 13? 12? Yes, trounced. Hard act. All right. I was having trouble finding a story because most of my encounters with law enforcement or any kind of authority, I was always I was never the hero in any of the stories. I was kind of a jerk kid. And, but I dig deep enough to my smoke-addled brain, and I picked this one little minuscule story. I hope it doesn't go longer than 5 minutes. I don't think it will. Is there a light? Do I look for a light? Oh, okay, timekeeper, thank you. All right. It was, let me take you back to 2003. Lincoln Park was coming out of all the drop-top convertibles. Families across the nation were huddled around their black and whites to watch Will and Grace. And Johnny was trying to avoid the draft to Afghanistan, I think. Or maybe it was Iraq at the time. I can't remember at this point. But it was July 3rd, and it was after the Horribles parade. Me, my friend Una, my friend Dave were all in the Gloucester High School parking lot where all the floats go at the end of the parade. Just deciding what we were going to do for the rest of the night. We were just kind of hanging around. We had idling just by a car, as most people were. We see this woman get out of a car, and we don't really think anything of it, and she looks at us and she goes, excuse me. And we go, yes, of course, we'll move right out of the way for you. And we go back to our conversation, and then this bigger man, kind of looks like Billy Blatz from Goodfellas, as if anybody knows that character. But just more heavy set and gray hair. And he comes up to us and he said, "You heard the lady, move out of the way." Now, we're just like, out of what? What, she's already over by you? Get out of the way! You're standing in front of a car! I was like, it's a parking lot. Everybody's standing in front of a car. He goes, and he pulls out a badge, and then he goes, "I'm a police officer." And we go, we didn't know it was illegal to stand in front of a car. And he's like, "Well, you gotta move." I'm like, now, my friends, they hadn't dealt with police officers before, really. They were very good people. Dave had just kind of like, he's finding himself. He's grown up in the church, and he's never dealt with anything like this. Una's a very nice girl. She just doesn't, she complies, she just moves out of the way. I have an attitude. I have a chip on my shoulder, just built up by, God knows what. I don't know why I have a chip on my shoulder at this point. My life was pretty good. I lived in Rockport. I was fine. Nothing bad really ever happened to me. I don't know why I have this adverse thing to authority, but I think it started when my brother showed me Public Enemy as a kid, and I was just entranced by Flavor Flav, because he wore so many bright colors, and I just love that. So soon I was, just saying things in kindergarten like, Rodney King deserves justice, and later on I was dead set that OJ did not do it. I was so, Later on, he did it. But, but I had this thing with authority. I don't know where it came from, but it was just sort of innate. And I was just like, I'm not going to move out of the way of the car. I'm talking to my friends. Your wife is fine. The car is fine. We're not doing anything to it. I don't understand what we're doing wrong. He goes, all right, that's it. You want to go? And then he grabs my arm and twists it behind my back. And like he's about to arrest me. He's off duty. I don't know how he was going to do this. He was going to drag a kid down to the station. No cuffs. He's like, he was standing in front of my wife's car. Throw the book at him. I don't know what the plan was. But I just stood there for a second just thinking, all right, well, I'm going to get arrested. I've gotten arrested at this point before. Several times. Again, I was 17. But several times just because I really liked, and I really didn't know Abby and some are going to be here. I really liked marijuana. I really lived in Rockport, and it was really around the time when those two things could not coexist, as far as Officer Tybert's concerned. But, so I was kind of just I was more mad. I was like, this is going to be the most ridiculous reason to get arrested ever. And his wife then says, it's not worth it. I'll just call him Joe, because I forget his name. Joe, don't worry about it. He's like, you're lucky, and let me go. And I didn't really think about it. I was kind of mad that night, but I didn't think about it at all until Amanda asked me to tell the story, and then I started thinking about it recently, and I go, oh, that was just a show. That was just like a play that they put on together, probably a lot. Just that use of authority to like sort of show that, yes, I am your hero. And I actually kind of think it's kind of sweet that they were doing that now. Like, I've been in a relationship for a decade and some change now, and I know that sometimes you gotta do a little extra to get the things going, you know? You gotta play around. Now I can just imagine their life now. I can see her peering out through the shades of her window, being like, I don't like how close that dog is to our flowers. He bursts out of the front door. Hey, you want to go downtown? Tackles the dog. It's not worth it, Joe. Don't worry about it. And they run upstairs. And he's a dom in the streets and a sub in the sheets, and that's the way it goes. But now, since I've been in a relationship for 12 years, and sometimes things slow down. That's just how it goes. But now I'm thinking about becoming a cop. I think I need that little extra juice. Wave a baton around. I'm good. That's the end. All right, thank you very much.
Funny stuff from Riley Knipsel. Thank you so much. Our next storyteller is Phoebe Potts. Phoebe, come on up.
I read tonight's theme, I Protest. I read it as I protest, because I do, and I have for 40 years. And as Wendy was saying, a lot of protest and demonstration comes from anger, and my anger was homegrown. I'm from Brooklyn, and not the lavender-infused bespoke kale pleasure dome that it is today. I'm from the more like murdery, dirty, segregated, goddamn Dodgers went to LA, Brooklyn of the 70s. And in Brooklyn, you wake up indignant. So it's part of who you are. But, so the anger could have come from that, but I think it is more likely it came from within my house. My mother was a despot, and she raised us on a steady diet of whole grains and vegetables and terror and shame. And so, well, I'm glad you find that amusing. And the only way I could, I was angry. I was angry at the tyrant, but it was to my peril if I expressed any of that anger inside the house. So I took my anger out to the streets. And when I was 5, I had the entire Equal Rights Amendment, the entire text on T-shirts, which I wore every day to my public school on 7th Avenue. Even in the winter, I wore them over a sweater. I was 5 and no one could read, so it didn't matter in my class, but I wore them. And then, like when I was 7, Ranger Rick came out with this, extra issue saying there are donkeys at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I don't know, and we needed, tourists were leaving them there, and we needed to raise funds with the Fund for Animals to airlift them out. And I was gonna raise awareness for the donkeys in the Grand Canyon, which is 2,000 miles away or more. And so I made a poster and I marched up and down 4th Street where, again, nobody saw me. And I had the address where you could send money to the Fund for Animals printed right here. And I walked up and down, nobody read it. So my dad said, well, you could go door to door. And I was gonna go door to door. I was gonna raise money. And technically I only went to one door. I went to my neighbors. There's these nice little old ladies from Syria. And they had the red flavored Jell-O, and they let me watch Sanford and Son, so I had to kind of put a pin in it on that cause. But my rage continued. It powered me through middle school, where I got it in my head that our lunch break should be more than 22 minutes, and the principal told me to buzz off, and so my friends and I made signs, and we marched, and we chanted, "Give us time," or "Give us Tums." And nothing happened with that. By the time I made it to college, I was itching for a fight. I wanted a fight so bad. And George Bush Sr. gave us one. He went to war with Saddam Hussein. And so I organized a whole bunch of students to do die-ins, where we would take over a college building that was full of students about to change classes, and then we would die in the hallways so that they would have to sort of pick over us. And that didn't make us any friends. So we started protesting at night. We would go to the dining halls and we'd kick in the door of the dining halls and we'd shout out the names of the dead, and then we would say really unhelpfully at the end, "And you killed them!" And it was mean and inaccurate. And but we would go, while I was doing that, I got to talk to the kitchen staff, and I found that the kitchen staff were in a legitimate dispute with the college over their contract, and so my friend and I formed the United Student Employee Delegation, or USED, and we did a lot, but what was sort of amazing about it is that I was getting to write papers about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire and Eugene Debs and Saul Alinsky in the morning, and then in the afternoon I was shouting in the face of the head of, the dean of students, "You can't balance the budget on the backs of the workers!" Like it was being said for the first time. But somebody took notice, the International Service Employees International took notice and recruited me as an organizer, and I organized hospital workers in California and school bus drivers in Texas and nursing home workers on the Cape. And on the Cape, I actually lived in the Union Hall. There was a little room above the offices, and I, made my eggs monastically on a hot plate in the morning. And my boss was this great guy because he wasn't afraid, and he was also angry, but very funny. And he would do things like he would listen to a manager at a nursing home, and they would be just it was so unjust, whatever they were doing, and he would listen, and he would go, "You know what, Johnson? You're stupid. In fact, you're so stupid that when we get off the phone, I'm gonna write a book about how stupid you are." I loved Bill. And he loved that I loved him, and that I was a really a very good Padawan, and that I followed in his steps. But he noticed, because I lived in the Union Hall, that I didn't have a boyfriend or didn't have any friends. And he would say, "Potts, you gotta stop and smell the flowers." And then I would take out my pocket copy of Axiom for Organizers and turn to page 36 and say, "Injustice never takes a vacation." The last, self-righteousness flowed through me like a mighty stream. The last protest that I was sent to was down in D.C. It was for justice for janitors. And we took an old car and we put it across the 14th Street Bridge during the morning commute, and we chained ourselves to it. And the cops came and wanted to move us off and realized they needed bolt cutters. So somebody went to get the bolt cutters. So we stayed there longer than we had anticipated. ¿Qué queremos? Justicia. ¿Cuándo? Ahora. And then we got hot and tired. And so I started chatting it up with the cops. They said, how long have you been doing this? Oh, 10 years, 20 years. And I said, so, is protest, is that kind of your beat? And they're like, yeah, pretty much. And I was like, so who's the biggest pain in the ass, huh? And they go, oh, no question, the right to lifers. Why? Well, they're big, and when you go to arrest them, they get down on the ground and they roll away. They just keep rolling away from you. So the guy with the bolt cutters came and sent us to, they arrested us. They took us all to central holding or whatever, took all day to process our stuff. And we sang and we chanted and we told jokes. And I went up to Leticia, who's the head of the lead organizer, and I said, Leticia, I gotta be here. This is where I gotta be. This is the shit. I wanna be in it. This is where it's happening. And she said, well, that would be great, but you're of no use to us because you don't speak Spanish, so you can't even answer the phone. So I said, all right, fine. I can take a challenge. I'll go learn Spanish. I'll go learn Spanish. I'll go learn Spanish. And she said, all right, so yeah, they have immersion programs. You can go to Mexico. You can go to Guatemala. And I was like, what do you think, like a week, 2 weeks, and then I can start? And she looked at me and she was like, no, it's more, a month, maybe 6 weeks. And I said, but it's all going to be over. I'm going to miss everything. She said, Phoebe, this is a long march, and there's going to be a lot of fights. And I said, well, I questioned her commitment. And then someone else said to me, oh, I'm totally dying, you guys. Oh, and you feel sorry for me. It's nice. So someone else in the jail that said, if you really want to get into it, if you really want to do it, go to Mexico. Because Subcomandante Marcos is leading the revolution, the Zapatistas, and the people are behind him, and you could be in on that. And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna learn Spanish, and I'm gonna do the good work at the same time. And that's gonna be amazing. And so anyway, I got down to Mexico, I learned Spanish, I made some friends, and I just kept not getting to Oaxaca, and a month became 2, and then 2 became 6, and then 6 became almost a year, and I just didn't go to Oaxaca. Because the anger was there, but it went on strike, and it was replaced by this suffocating sadness. So I went home, I didn't tell anybody I was coming, I washed ashore at my parents' house, I got into bed for 6 months, and there's another long story about how I got from there to here, but what I came away with is that injustice never takes a vacation, but I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. That was fantastic. I've got Jim Dowd coming up right now. Jim Dowd, storyteller in residence here for Fishtails.
Okay. So, I think about what's going on now, and one of the things I hear a lot of people say is that, this has never happened before. It's so unfamiliar. And what I think is the weirdest thing, and I know a lot of people will agree with me, is actually what's going on, I feel like, right now is actually very familiar to those of us who escaped abusive households. And what you'll remember for those of us who escaped abusive households is that at some point, it stops being about what's wrong and what's right, and it just starts going into trying to hurt each other. And I feel like the country is there now, and we're just in this place where we're just trying to hurt each other. And then what happens at that point is separation. And so for me, back in the 80s, and in a weird, literally paperwork error, I got away from my abusive household because some people from Cambridge ran a summer camp, and these were communists, and they were it was a communist socialist summer camp in New Hampshire, of all places, and I wound up going there, and the people who ran the camp kind of took me in when my family just got really, really toxic, and so here I am in the 80s in Cambridge with communists who like actual communists, but I'm sort of a punk, right? I'm sort of a punky kid and a rebel kind of thing, and it was interesting being around this group of people as a kid from that era, because we're all kind of punked out, and it's we're resisting, but where I'm at a gather, I think it was Thanksgiving, it might have been actually at Howard Zinn's house actually, and because he was in that kind of crowd, and I remember we were joking with one of the people that says we had red clown noses on it. I said, we're clownists, we're not socialists. Some friends of mine and I, we're giving away goods on the street corner, as that's clownism. And he's this older gentleman with white hair, it's just long hair. He's like, you shouldn't make fun of socialism because every pothole that goes unfilled is a job that is stolen from a worker. And I'm like, who's this guy, right? Going to get Mike food or whatever, and it's like, he was in Auschwitz. So right, you kind of forget that that there are people in the movement, in the community like that. And then another time we were getting ready to go up to Vermont to Bread and Puppet, and so we were at Tommy's Lunch. And for folks who know Tommy's Lunch in Cambridge, it's in Mass Ave, and there's this little kind of down through. So had a couple of pinball machines, and it was a guy who'd actually Tommy Kelly, who'd gone to fight in the Red Brigades in the Spanish Civil War, and so he'd gone, and he came back and he got blackballed, and I don't know what he had done, but he just opened a lunch place. That was all he could do. And we were planning our trip to Vermont. We were talking about what we were going to do. We were a little older, and he said, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we're going up. We're going to build these huge puppets, right? They're going to be giant puppets, and then there's huge heads, and we're building this giant Cesar Romero that's going to come down the street." And he just goes, "I bet the juntas are fucking terrified," right? Because puppets just didn't seem like a threat to the way that he had sort of faced fascism in the past, and so as I'm sort of thinking about what had gone on, and as years later have come, and we were kind of spoiling for a fight, and Phoebe seems like she found hers, but we never kind of found ours. We all just kind of went on and went to college and kind of joined the bourgeoisie, and so here I am, I guess 30 years later, and thinking to myself, wow, what would I say if I were back in a room with Tommy Kelly and Volker was the name of the guy who didn't think we were so funny about our little socialism gags. To today, here I am, and something is happening that feels like it's kind of going in the wrong direction, and I was wondering, I think I know what I would say is, you guys were young, you guys were 20 years old when you got called up, or when you went, or when they came for you, and I think of who I am now. I'm like, geez, I'm almost 50 years old, and I've got kids, and I've got all this stuff. What am I to do, and what are we to do at this point? And I've been putting a lot of thought into this recently, and I think that what I've come to, what I've started to realize, and this is not my usual sort of funny thing, so I'm sorry, but is that doing exactly what you do when you leave an abusive household, which is you just learn to live the best you can, to try to treat each other well throughout all your dysfunction, to take in the survivors who come your way, and just to live. And so one of the things that really has me heartened in this is just hearing Amanda's intro and saying, and we're going to come here, and we're going to talk about food, and we're going to talk about stuff, and we're going to have music, and we're going to have everyone here, and we're going to talk. And so Tommy Kelly aside, who probably had a little bit more direct concept of action, I just want to really remind ourselves that what we're doing here and how we're treating each other and how we're doing this around ourselves is probably what makes the most difference of all, as a way of example. So thanks very much.
Our next storyteller is B. Freely.
Hello. So that was really fired me up. So here we go. I have a story. It's called A Loose Fish Tale, and I'm going to get right into it. We were out of class, rapping in a circle of wooden chairs junked by Borders Books in a beat-up bookstore that used to be a supermarket. No AC, smell of cat piss and ancient paperbacks, coffee dregs, and dust. Greensboro, NC, end of May 2014. Sun setting on us, the hardcore bookshop haunters, and not a window to open in this place. So the glass front door was propped by a plant pot. Occasionally, we got a slow bit of wind. We were going back and forth as usual, trying to listen to each other, dig, come to some changes in our ways of thinking, encouraging each other, raging out of all that lazy shit you give up to, cop to, seeing each other's eyes optimistically. When we got on an email I received along with all the other students at UNCG inviting us to a ribbon cutting ceremony for a tunnel that would cut into the last vitals of the neighborhood we worked, lived, loved, and walked in. And bam, it came into me. It came out of me. UNCG, the University of North Carolina at gentrification. My communard smiled. That's it, man. What are we going to do about it? My mind's a go. Oh, there, fuck it. Fuck them. We're going to go and drop a banner in the middle of the fucking ceremony and call it what it is. Gentrification, falsehood, greed. Okay, let's act the will. Okay. We see if Randy Q is down. He is, and the ceremony's in 2 days. The first night, we case the joint, scoping out the ins and outs of the tunnel, gathering supplies. The banner will be an old curtain we find in the back of the bookshop that just so happens to have a pouch at the bottom will fill with dirt. Rosemary designs the banner. Randall gathers stakes from his garden and sharpens them to stab into the dirt at the top of the tunnel where the tomb stands that's engraved UNCG. We'll cover that up. As all the invaders look up and see truth, we add to this resistance with what we learned from the yippies. Throw in something strange so that they have no clue what's going on. My deep sexuality comes out weird. Randy, man, we'll dress up as in disguise as women. He's gay for it, okay? The next day, we go to the neighborhood strip mall and buy disguises. Randy gets a burgundy wig, purple flower Grammy sandals, and a flowery nightie. I will don a blonde wig with bangs and sassy sunglasses, bright white orthopedic shoes, tight blue jeans, a UNCG shirt under a beige blazer. I say, okay, man, we'll be like lovers, and then we'll drop it and hold hands and skip away. Change behind the burger joint next to the tunnel. Word. Night of no sleep. Rosemary and I stay up painting the banner while we listen to the Poison Girls, Chappaquiddick Bridge, 1980. Going into sleep debt fast, but it's okay. That's how you get shit done. Rosemary's working so hard, brave and beautiful. The bookshop cat runs across the paint. We correct. I type a pamphlet to disperse, having studied the Situationist May, sous le pavier, la plage. And Rosemary hops on the computer while I go back to painting, and she sets the pamphlet and puts a peace sign in a circle A under Dorothea Lange's Depression Mother with children looking out on the back. It's cool for once, night verging to morning purple. We all have exams. The ceremony's at 2. A couple of hours before, Randy looks at me and says, what if we get busted? All I got is, it may well be. We go brave, escape route planned. Rosemary has another exam, and we'll rush to the lookout as it lets out. Randy and I take off from his place in plain clothes, change into our disguise, get to the top of the tunnel, timing it with the procession that will end at our end for all to see. Sun is so bright, wind gusts now, and my perception slows down as we stake the ropes in the clay and walk over the edge and let it unfurl in the wind. Time goes back to speed. We look at each other, grab hands, and skip away. Through the auto garage parking lot, oily scum, asphalt, Lee Street, cars roaring away, people wide-eyed, and I hear the cop, hey, I keep skipping and we make it behind the fence, doffing quick through a slit. I see 5 cops, hands to pistol hip, rushing. Yo, Randall, they're coming. I'm gonna hop over. He nods, scaling the fence the other way, barefoot. I go over and dash my fucking ass off as my mom says, if you see them coming, get away. Full on into a traffic blast, and I make it into an empty lot. I think I'm clear. I slip into a porta potty and lock the door. Check the cell. Rosemary texts me, you okay? I text back in all caps, cops, and then one starts punching the blue plastic. I see the light of day with each blow. Open up. You better open up. You better open up. I wait, breathe. Hear him on a walkie, open the shitter, and brake for the back of an abandoned house that the university owns. The fuzz is on my ass. I'm running through the grass. I'm running down the street. He yells, I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. I look back and say, why? Still running, booking it. A squad car screeches to a halt, blocking the road ahead. And wham, 3 of the fuckers tackle me and smack my chin against the sidewalk, and I can't hear. One yells, give me your fucking arm, while his knee's in my back, pinning that arm under my wind-knocked belly. I mumble a minute or two. I'm lifted to my feet, beard bloody, just breathe, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. They throw me into the squad car backwards. I land, cuffed. I'm headed downtown, looking out the window on my side at the buildings of downtown Greensboro, when a voice comes over their radio. The 2 female suspects have yet to be apprehended. Fish, tail, fin.
B. Thank you. Be freely. Our next storyteller is Jessica Semeraro.
Hi. It's my birthday. Thank you. I don't really like to get anything on my birthday, but I like to do something on my birthday that is new or uncomfortable or just that I like to do. So, so I've had a lot of different jobs and lived in a lot of different cities, and dozens of jobs, actually, sometimes many a year. And I grew up poor, and sometimes when you grow up poor, you don't really know your worth. And you don't understand how people make money in the world, and you don't see how people can make money through work. Like, there's no connection, because the poor people, work really hard, and there's no money to show for it. So when I was growing up, I had a lot of things I liked to do and wanted to be, but more I had things that I really didn't want to do or didn't want to be. So I would look at pictures of children with coal dust on their faces and think about what would the worst job be, and oh God, that would be so bad. And I really loved A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. That was one of my favorite books, because the girl in that, she has all this tiny piecework that she has to do. She's 12 years old, and she has to put all this weird piecework together very quickly, in a factory. 7 years ago, I moved back to Gloucester, and I got a job in a factory. And I had jobs that I liked, and I've had jobs that I didn't like. But this job had a living wage, and it was a union job. And it had insurance. I had never had insurance in my life. So I did what people do, and I put my head down and, to the grindstone, and worked. And there's really, when you're in sometimes you think I'm a good person, and no matter in what situation, I'm gonna be a good person, and I'm not gonna lose my temper, And even if people around me are being weird, I can hold my own. And then you're put in a situation you realize, no, I'm no different than anyone. Everyone here fights with everyone else. We all lose our cool. We all call each other names. You see a new person come in, and they start to say the same thing. I'm not gonna let this place drag me down. I'm above it, and then you see them snap. And it's almost better that way, because when you snap, you just realize that it's okay to snap. And it's okay to make mistakes. And it's okay to lose your temper. And it's okay to be mean, because that's not the end of you. So it was, it had pretty nasty parts, this job. The boredom, which looking back on it, I kind of miss being bored. But at the time, it was, I would ask people, what do you do? What do you do when you're looking at the line? You're just looking at things go by for 8, 12, 16 hours. And some people would be like, well, I replay movies in my head. And I kind of get that, because some days I sang every song that I knew in my head, and then I would look at the clock and only 20 minutes had passed. And some days I would just think of a project, something that I wanted to do in the world or that day, and those were the days that it went by quickly. So the thing about this union was it's ruled by seniority, and so the higher up you are, the better jobs you get. And a better job in this kind of factory meant one where you could move your body freely. So one where you could walk around, and one where you didn't have to ask someone to go to the bathroom, because that's one of the shameful parts, when you have to ask someone to go to the bathroom, and they can say yes, or they can say no, or they can say wait, and you have to hold it. To see a grown man cry because he can't go to the bathroom is really terrifying. So there were certain jobs, and I started to get higher in seniority, and I was ready for that job where I could walk around the factory. And it was my turn. So about a year before it was my turn, I said to the boss, I want this job. When it comes up, I want it. I can do it. Give it to me. It's going to be my turn. And then it was my turn, and I had been there 3 years, and I saw the job go to somebody that had been there 6 months. This didn't make sense. And it was a man. He was white. He was young. And the person that had it before him was the same. And they skipped over me, and they skipped over one of my coworkers who is Dominican. And we got together, and we were like, this is not right. That shouldn't be. And so we talked to the boss, and they were like, well, this guy looked like he could do the job. And so after months and months of complaining, me and my friend went to the union leaders and complained with them, and it was just a very slow process. And it takes a lot of complaining and talking and making yourself feel really uncomfortable and like you might be wrong. And people calling you a bitch. And people saying, in the case of my friend, he's playing the race card. And anyway, finally, we got the job, and we got called more nasty names. But we got to go to the bathroom whenever we wanted. And I guess I wanted to talk about how resisting is something that it just never ends, and you just have to keep doing it, because when I moved on from that job, it was again given to a young man that had not been there for very long, a young white man, and they had skipped over somebody that had been there longer, who was African-American woman, and she was put in the same position. And it just, I don't have a lot of hope about it changing in that scenario, but the more people that keep complaining, perhaps it will change. That's it.
Thank you, Jessica. The importance of workers' rights. So many great stories here tonight. Our last story teller is Brian King. Come on up.
The stories tonight were amazing, and thank you, everyone. And I'm terrified that I'm last, actually. A few days ago, I got a message from Amanda. She asked if I wanted to be part of this, and I actually texted you. I'm like, I have this story about Jean Genet, a queer French writer that I read when I was 16 and changed my life. And then I remembered the last time I spoke here, I talked about Jean Genet and went, oh, that's kind of boring. So maybe I'll just talk about my day. And nothing really happened today. Actually, let me clarify that. A lot didn't happen to me today. I got up and I went and got a haircut at the Gloucester crossing, you know, where Market Basket is and Marshall's. And there's a little salon there. And usually you can't get in, but I got in and a woman touched my hair there, and that happened. But I paid her to do that, so I kind of made it happen, you know. But no one else there touched my hair, and no one reached out and went, "Oh, your hair is kind of cool and weird. I'm going to touch it," because I can just do that. So then I left and I went to Marshall's. I had my bag and I was walking around the aisles. I wanted to get some new sneakers. Sometimes they have them in 13. And I was, walking around the aisles and no one really noticed me. No one was, following me with their eyes, looking at my hands, looking at my bag. That wasn't happening. And no one came up to me and said, "Can I help you?" That didn't happen either. And then I didn't find sneakers, but I always buy boxers because you have to. And they rang me up, and I just had a credit card, and no one said, "Do you have any ID?" That didn't happen either. So I got my boxers, and I'm walking out, and I pass, just a white woman, middle-aged woman, and I'm passing her, and it was normal. She didn't notice me. I didn't really notice her. It was pretty casual, and I didn't have to think, oh, should I smile to make her more comfortable? I didn't have to grapple with that question or that decision. And then I, left and just kind of spent my day normally. Nothing really happened. I didn't do much. I talked to some friends, some strangers, and nobody asked me about Black Lives Matter, and nobody asked me about statistics about white-on-white crime. And I was never the only person in the room with my skin color. So none of that happened. And then I drove here tonight, and I did notice a cop behind me, but he didn't pull me over. And and he didn't aim a gun in my face and kill me in front of a 4-year-old and my partner. So that didn't happen to me today, and I noticed that. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Brian. And thank you to all our storytellers who are here tonight, and to all of you. The audience is just such a vital piece of the Fishtails program, and anybody who stands up here understands how important the audience is. So thank you for being a loving, giving audience and for giving your time for us tonight. Our next show is going to be in September. The theme is birth. And the next show after that is December 1st. It will be at the Gloucester Stage Company. It'll be a fundraiser. And we hope that you are able to come to both of those shows. Again, if you have any questions about Fishtails, please talk to me after the show. Thank you all for being here tonight, and we'll see you at the next one.